I love it when I find a new booktuber. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Welcome to the channel if this is your first time. My name is Gareth, and this is Book, Songs and Other Magic. And I'm doing a video today that's a very immediate response to a booktuber, or a booktuber couple, that I've just seen. It just came up on my feed. I thought, oh, watch this. And I absolutely love them. I think they're awesome. Absolutely awesome. So I'm going to watch tons of their videos now. But I wanted to respond to this one, partly to advertise the channel. So they've got over 3,000 subs, so I'm sure some of the people watching this will already watch them, and they're not necessarily desperate for subs, but it's nice to, when you see someone you really like, it's nice to share the love, tell people about it. And I thought that there was so many things that I liked about this video that I'm responding to, so I'm going to respond to what they say in the video, but I have to say every single thing they said was just awesome. So it was one of those videos where it was just a real joy to watch. And the interaction between the two of them is fantastic. And they're really, really charismatic. I would definitely recommend you watch them. And one's Taylor and one's Brandon. And they do the show together. They do a podcast together. Their Booktube content together. And they really bounce off each other really well. And you can see that they've got different specialisms just from this video. You can see that Brandon used to read a lot of non-fiction, and they looks like they've shared some things they've watched. They've read together as well. But yeah, absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I loved it. So basically, the video that I watched was called 10 Spicy Opinions from Booktube, and I've written down these spicy opinions. I'm going to put my own take on them. And a couple of them I've talked about before on the channel, to be fair, but loads of them I haven't. So, you know, it kind of makes this video useful, or at least a little bit fresh as well. But it is mostly the advert for that channel, because if you haven't seen their channel, it's so good. So I did this a few months back with Hardy's Books. I was really impressed with that channel. And again, that was a couple. But yeah, this was just awesome. The way that they spoke to the camera, and every single thing they said was just awesome. So anyway, I'm a big fan immediately of Taylor and Brandon, and their channel is called Good Books Lately. Good Books Lately. Okay, so they start their video by saying, let's get triggered, everybody, because these are contentious opinions on Booktube, and there's 10 of them. They picked 5 each. So let's dive in. So the first one is, audiobooks don't count as reading. And I absolutely loved it when Taylor said, count as what? Because audiobooks don't count as reading. This comes up a lot. But then they first say, you know, oh, it comes up a lot. And then it is a good point to say, count as what? What are you trying to prove with your reading? Because if you're trying to say, oh, look, I read all these books, you know, I read more books than you, or something like that, then you're being a plonker. It shouldn't be about how many books you read and whether you read more books than somebody else, and whether or not you're a faster reader, or you know more than somebody else, or you've been reading a particular genre for longer than someone else. You know, that kind of Booktube drives me nuts. It really does get on my nerves. So I don't think that's very productive. It's not very nice. It's not particularly useful. It's not constructive. Sometimes someone can read a lot less of a genre than you have and actually have a better take on it, because, you know, sometimes you might misunderstand something, or, you know, it doesn't really matter how much you've read something. So I do think that sometimes these people that want to lord over somebody else about how much of a better reader they are don't understand that reading one thing once, you can have a really valid response from it. So yeah, this idea of people comparing what they're reading and then saying, you know, don't count, you know, the audiobooks don't count, is a bit silly. The actual subject audiobooks, I really have tried to, because it would benefit me in my lifestyle. It would benefit me to have audiobooks. There is an issue that I actually also want to try and alternate between reading on the bus and on the train and stuff like that, and actually listening to music, because I'm listening to less music on public transport than I used to, because I'm reading now. and I do feel like I miss that a little bit. So that's only going to be compounded if I start listening to audiobooks. But I do wish I had that skill of taking in audiobooks, because it just doesn't go in. So I envy people that can read audiobooks. I think that's awesome. If you're worried about Ralph next to me making odd noises, he's been doing it all day and I think he's fine. He's just clearly got to get something out of his system. Right, the second question. Reading more than one book at once is confusing. I don't think that's necessarily true, and it depends on the book. I think if you're reading two very similar books in quick succession and alternating and like basically reading them together, that can be. I think most people that read more than one book at the same time are usually reading different things. They might read non-fiction one, they might read one fiction of a particular type and then maybe another one of a different type, maybe a poetry book at the same time. You know, it's very rare, from my experience, from when I've talked to people and friends and all that, and other booktubers as well, that have said that they read the same thing multiple times. Jenny might be if you're watching this, Jenny, you better tell me that you're all of these 26 series you're reading, or 126 series you're reading, you're all reading them at once. That could be a thing. So you can tell me if that's confusing. But I think for most people, reading more than one book isn't confusing because they are very different books. That's what I think. And if you imagine you're watching different TV programs, then you're not going to get confused because you're watching, a different thing at a different time. It's just not a thing, is it? So the third question is, book hauls encourage overconsumption and an unrealistic reading habit. Okay, so I have seen this quite a number of times, and I get the impression this comes a lot off TikTok and Instagram as well, and I think it's a bit weird, really. I think to assume that a book haul is somehow judging you and what you're buying, and that whether you're buying enough. I think a book haul is a way of celebrating what you've bought. It's a way of talking about books in a different way than just the ones you've read. So you're talking about, oh, I can't wait to read this because I've heard about it. Oh, look what I found. Maybe you found something unusual, or you found something you didn't realize existed, or you're asking for comments on the chat and comments on the video because you want to know what this book's like and you just bought it. I think book hauls have got all sorts of different uses. And I don't know if anyone's ever put a book haul on their channel to say you should buy more. You people that are watching this video should be buying more. I don't even think it's relevant. So the idea it encourages overconsumption. I don't think it does encourage overconsumption, but it might make a viewer that's watching it that's already a little bit worried about how much they buy. Then sort of get inside their head and get a bit freaked out by all that sort of stuff. But that's not on the booktuber making the book haul. That's on the person watching it, really, because I don't think the book haul itself is doing that. I think it's just obviously that's something that someone has to deal with and process and decide whether or not they're going to keep buying books and that. So I think book hauls are really cool, actually. I love watching people's book hauls. Number 4, non-fiction is superior to fiction because it teaches us something. Okay, well, clearly, I'm going to make the point that fiction teaches us something. We can learn so much. We can develop a lot more empathy, and we can find out about somebody's culture. We can learn a lot of language skills as well from fiction. Our development of our vocabulary can come from fiction. There's all sorts of things that come from fiction that actually you don't always get from non-fiction. So non-fiction can teach you things. But there's often an opinion within that non-fiction, unless it's natural history or something, like sciences and stuff. But if it's actual history, or if it's philosophy, or if it's a biography, then it probably is opinionated. So that's something to think about, that you're not just learning, you're learning somebody's opinion about it. But also, sometimes a non-fiction book, if it's written in a really dry manner, you're not going to learn as much as you would from a book that does the same thing but in a fictional way, because you're going to get that extra emotion out of it as well, which help you to learn more from it. So I do think that's true as well. So it's a bit of a shame that there are people who read non-fiction that again, lord over the fiction readers as if they're doing something better. You know, stop judging, as Taylor keeps saying in her video, stop judging. Number 5, series should stop expanding beyond a trilogy unless it demands it. Okay, unless it demands it. Unless it demands it means that you're not enjoying it. But clearly, if a series has gone on for 12, 15 books, probably some people are enjoying it because they keep buying them. And I do think this is a sort of thing where a book series would stop if people stopped buying it. So I think that, I don't know, but I imagine books like Wheel of Time is probably consistently popular, I guess, I imagine. But that's definitely true for the Expanse series. Everyone says how much some people have said there's a little bit of a dip in the middle, but in general, they like all the books. And the Dresden Files is definitely an example where people absolutely love it as it goes along, and they just keep saying it keeps getting better and better and better and better. So I have read the first Expanse book, and I've read 2 Dresden Files books, and I'm very intrigued, and I'd love to keep reading that kind of thing if it keeps getting better. So I think it depends on your own experience of it, and I did say recently to someone that I think a trilogy is enough, but I think sometimes with something like Dresden Files, that's clearly a character and a setting and a world that you've built, but the plots change each book, so yeah, that can go on forever, couldn't it? So I don't think it's the same as one story with a beginning, middle, and an end. Okay, number 6. Villains are more interesting than heroes. Okay, I understand. I've heard this a lot, so people say this about DC as well, that Batman isn't as interesting as his villains. And I don't actually agree with that about Batman. I love Batman, and I think the same with Spider-Man's cool, and Spider-Man is actually much more interesting than a lot of the villains that he gets given. But I do think it just depends on the book you're talking about, because I think that both should be nuanced. There should be something interesting about the hero, and there should be something interesting about the villain. If it's like a real kind of extreme pantomime villain where they just go ha 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 and then just doing extreme things and there's no nuance in it, then I don't think that's good writing anyway. One of the really nice things that you see sometimes is when there's a villain with a really good reason to be a villain, and you kind of empathize a little bit. I think that's really good when that happens. Equally, a good character, a heroic character that's just like 100% angelic, that's not as interesting. And there's all sorts of ways you can put a bit of nuance in it. You can make them have faults that derive from their innocence or their lack of knowledge, their naivety. You can also maybe have them a little bit entitled, or they demand stuff from other people in a way that isn't fair. You know, the heroes can be all sorts of things. You know, so I think that both should be nuanced. So I don't think that it's necessarily just that villains are better. If you think about something like 1984 as well, clearly that's a situation where the hero is your point of view character and has to be more interesting, otherwise you're not going to be interested. And the villain is the rest of the book. The villain is the world. The villain is the society that he's rallying against, and Big Brother is only, you know, is this sort of huge thing that is the antagonist that Winston's trying to deal with. So, you know, there are things like that where the scale is much bigger as far as what the villain is, and the hero has to be somebody you relate to because you're going through that journey, you know. Number 7, books marketed as spicy focus less on storytelling and more on the spice. I love what they said about it. I thought it was really funny that, you know, if you're buying a spicy book and it's advertised as a spicy book, why are you surprised that that's what they're concentrating on? I think that's brilliant. I mean, that's just obvious, isn't it? But yeah, I guess there must be people saying that that's an issue, but it's a bit of a weird one. Number 8 is happy endings are boring or unrealistic, and I prefer a tragic or a bittersweet conclusion. I was thinking about that during the video when I was watching it, and I actually think that I really, really like it. I prefer it, I think, when there's happy endings, because a good writer and a good book will end the book, will give you a happy ending in a way that is really satisfying. So it makes you smile at the end. So it's not just that it's a happy ending. So it's not neat and tidy. It could be that the last few pages, the characters have really learned something, or there's a new relationship been established, or they're looking in a new direction for the rest of their lives, or for something they're going to deal with. It could be a happy ending that's still a bit open-ended. There's all sorts of ways you could do a happy ending that's really satisfying. And actually, sometimes a deliberately negative ending or a non-ending can be unsatisfying. So I personally think that happy endings can be fantastic. And I think a lot of my favourite books have got happy endings. Now I'm thinking, it's a bit of a mix. So yeah, whatever. Number nine, owning tons of books you haven't read is wasteful. This is a really good point where Taylor says, stop judging. Absolutely, stop judging. Owning tons of books you haven't read. This comes up a lot. This is similar to that one about book hauls encourage overconsumption. You shouldn't be making judgments on what people have got. And owning tons of books is actually part of being a reader. It's part of loving collecting books and being over the moon when you found a book in a shop that you really wanted and didn't know existed, or it was a rare find, or it's something else that you can't wait to get to, but you can't read it yet, but you're going to get to it, all that kind of, and then obviously life happens and you don't get to it for a year or whatever, 5 years. That's life. If you've got other things happening in your life, you can't just read constantly. There are a few friends on Booktube that do just do that, but they're very, very few. Most people have got a job, they've got a family, they've got other hobbies that they do. There's all sorts of things that can stop you from reading. So you can't read at the same rate as you would like to. And that means you do end up with books you haven't read. So stop judging. Number 10, Catcher in the Rye. Okay. So Brandon said that Catcher in the Rye, he didn't say this, although he kind of did say it, but he was quoting the opinion that Catcher in the Rye is just a whiny git moaning all the way through the book. And I've got to make reference to Pat from Book Chat with Pat. She recently did a book review kind of analysis video where she talks about Catcher in the Rye, and it was one of in her series of books that she loves to teach, or did love to teach, books she loved to teach. And she talked about how frustrated she was because people have said that about Catcher in the Rye, and there's so much more depth to the book, and it isn't just that, and that you've got a character dealing with depression and self-loathing and all that, so I read this at school, but I remember getting a lot out of it, and I remember the kind of feel of it. I've kind of got this memory that he's kind of drifting and not really settling and not feeling like he belongs anywhere. But it was quite a while ago, and I've got this to read again as part of the banned books project that we're doing. So I'm going to be reading this again, possibly in March. And that's my plan anyway. I want to get a couple more down in March of the banned books project. But it'll be interesting to find out if I can cope with this. Because what I was going to say, which is a different thing from what Pat said, because I'm sure Pat's right, because she's got a very good take on books all the time that I've seen her. I think she's definitely worth checking out. Check out her channel if you don't know. So that's absolutely true. But it does depend on who you are that's reading it, and who you are is going to be all what you take from it. Who you are is going to be what you take from it. So I'll give you. I did have two examples in my head, but I'm definitely going to give you one example. One's the music example, but I'm going to give you the book example that I was going to say, and that's Ghost World, the comic Ghost World. So when I saw the film Ghost World with Steve Buscemi and Scarlett Johansson and Thora Birch in it, I really enjoyed the film. And it is quite faithful to the graphic novel, so I think it's a fair comparison. When I read the graphic novel, it was 15-20 years later, and I'd been a teacher for a while. Because I teach music, I have so many students that are suffering from mental health problems and that kind of thing. I find it frustrating. I try and make an influence as much as I can, but sometimes you teach someone for 2 years, and at the end of those 2 years, they're still struggling with the same things. It's inevitable, because clearly it's not going to take a short amount of time to deal with them. But it is something that I find really frustrating, and that sense of not belonging and being apart from the rest of the world and being cynical about everything that's around you is part of that. So by the time I'd read the graphic novel of Ghost World, I'd already experienced that for quite a while, and I found it a lot harder to read Ghost World than watching the film originally 15-20 years before that. So that was an interesting insight into how where you are and what you do in your life really does affect how you feel about the things that you read. And yeah, I just found the graphic novel really frustrating, I wanted to speak to them and say, well, there is an alternative look at this, so I do think that really colours it. So Catcher in the Rye, if you can relate to the character's feelings, you will find him more sympathetic. But if you don't have any kind of tolerance for that kind of feeling, then clearly that's going to flag up things straight away as you're reading it. You're just going to be like, oh, this guy should just cheer up and all that. So I think that's a really important element to that question about Catcher in the Rye. Where are you in your life and how you feel about other people when you're reading it? So that's my conclusion about this response to this awesome video by Taylor and Brandon, collectively known as Good Books Lately, and 10 Spicy Opinions. They did say a number of times, and I think I should probably repeat it because it's a very important point. Don't murder anybody, don't take drugs, and clearly don't sell drugs. Thanks for watching, everyone. Stay curious. Picture of what it's like to be